Again, nice seeing all your faces every week. Nice to see you. Hope everyone had a good weekend. You guys all got whatever you needed to get done. Always good to have something accomplished. Add your names to the attending, add some quick reports if you'd like to update us on some stuff. As far as agenda items, we're gonna again discuss, last week we were talking about the governance related docs. I know I put in a read through at least some point over the weekend or over the week. It looked good to me. I was hoping other people's read it as well and added, thumbs up on some comments on things. Have you seen anything come through, Lindsay, outside of that or outside of?
I think we got comments from most folks. I realized that the pull request we had was just for one minor fix that Soggy made. It wasn't for the full thing. So I started a pull request for the full thing, but if you commented on either, that's fine. Yeah, and so I haven't seen any suggestions. Does anyone want more time to review this? Silence? Okay.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so then this next steps I would suggest is we can go ahead and merge this and then do actually a set of release notes with it. I don't think it needs to be anything long. I'll just kind of point to the changes, but so that we kind of have a check mark at a point in time that this got done. Yeah, so I can do that after the meeting.
Sounds good to me. No, not hearing any objections from everyone. This is basically the SimPEG quorum here. Were there any other agenda things to talk about? At least longer discussion items for people to start thinking about.
I added one item there and posted this on Slack as well. So Sagi and I were chatting last week about the idea of maybe having like SimPEG sort of science talks, so more like it could be research talk or talk about a project you're working on, and having that something like maybe a monthly cadence. I feel like weekly is too much for that, and even every other week is a fair bit. But I would see it as an opportunity to kind of keep a pulse on what people are working on. And then also, I think it's a great chance to engage folks who aren't necessarily as involved like in actually changing the code, but use the code regularly. Like I would love to hear from Craig or Sean Walker or others who are using SimPEG somewhat regularly, but wouldn't necessarily come to these meetings or sort of be touching stuff in the code base. Yeah, Sagi, was there anything you wanted to add to?
No, particularly, that was actually pretty good. And if nobody wants to talk, I can start a kickoff.
That'd be great.
We need a catchy name for it.
Yes, we can come up with something. We'll leave that open for ideas. Does anyone have a preference on day or sort of timing in the month? What I would suggest is we maybe try and pick a day that we try and do this regularly on, like the last Thursday of the month or something like that. And then be flexible though on the actual time, because we do have people in a bunch of different time zones, and so we can try and fit a time that'll be reasonable for both the speaker and most of the people who want to attend. But yeah, I don't think there's a time we can pick that will work in general.
And this may open up some sort of invitation, because I think not necessarily all SimPEG users are attending this meeting. So for instance, some of my colleagues actually actively using SimPEG, but they're not necessarily interested in coming here and talk about SimPEG itself. But they might be love to talk about how they used SimPEG for their research and what they want to see. So yeah, this probably open up, maybe I think not us talking, maybe other people talking about SimPEG.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, Sagi, if you're game to kick us off, is there a time, a day in the near future you'd like to aim for?
I'm pretty flexible, so we set a relatively regular date. I don't know, like fourth week of Thursday or something like that. I could do a kickoff about some sort of something related to groundwater.
Sure. How about, do we want to try like the first Thursday of the month? So that would be, I guess that's Canada Day this time around. Maybe the second Thursday of the month. So the 8th.
Sounds like a day.
Sure.
Cool. Okay. Well, we can get that kind of organized, and we'll pick a time, and we can record those. And I think it would be great to actually, we can make a habit of kind of highlighting them, maybe even providing like a little abstract too. Like we could start a curve note project that's kind of on these talks, and link to the slides, have a short abstract, a short bio. So it can be kind of something that highlights speakers and folks in the community too.
What is the relevant time? Is like a 15-minute talk or 45-minute talk, or what's what it could be a desired 15-minute? Is that better?
I think it could go a little longer. I would say maybe like plan for kind of a 20-minute, half an hour, and then have half an hour of discussion kind of.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable to me. Like, I don't want to make it like a really long seminar, like 40-minute talk or anything, but if I think 20 minutes is good, then we can leave time for people to chat afterwards. And if the speaker does want to go longer, then that's probably fine too.
But it would be nice to have some time to actually like get into some of the details, and 15 minutes is a little short for that.
And I would suggest that we do it in the morning so that we can get the East Coast, Europe, right? Because at the end of the day, otherwise it's just Australia and the West Coast. That would be my suggestion. And Thursdays is BCGS sometimes also 4:30. So,
Right.
Joe, you saying?
I was gonna say, like we said, we're gonna try to keep it like depending on like who's talking, sort of a little bit flexible on time.
Yeah. You can move it.
Okay. Sounds like a good place to start on that. And then we can move on to some quick reports. So I've basically gone through the time domain EM1D stuff, and I've got it into something that I'm happy with. And meaning like just the simulation classes. I still haven't like gone through and looked at, Sagi, how you're implementing all of like the tiled or like the stitched inversions, like how to best implement that. But I've seen it, and I can imagine how I would extend what I've done to that pretty quickly. But I was able to generalize it to like arbitrary waveforms. I added a new waveform class that was kind of more similar. I added a piecewise linear waveform. So I believe that was more like what was the general waveform in the original EM1D code. It was just treated as a piecewise linear function. I don't think it's necessary for us to support like the raw source waveform, because it could just be anything and it's hard for us to know what it is like ahead of time. Like that raw waveform is just any function, right? So it's hard for us to really support anything with it as far as the M1D integration. But everything that is well defined in there, I now can do. So like the triangular waveform, trapezoidal, VTEM, the half sine, on ramps, they're all implemented properly and they're all implemented like with their own. So I just essentially added their derivatives to everything, and then added a property on the waveforms that knows like, okay, it's piecewise, they're piecewise functions, right? So it just adds the nodes for the piecewise and then it integrates between them. So I added like very minimal amounts to the original waveforms to get them to work. And then I kind of gone through and just, it's pretty, I don't know, I think it's like, it uses, like I just had to do a really high order Gaussian quadrature on it for the convolution integral, because the way I was doing it, it didn't matter how high of an order I did. It didn't change, like, it doesn't change the time to actually forward model it. It just changes it a little bit. Makes it take a little bit longer to set it up. But every time you run it, the runtime is independent of the quadrature. So
Joe, did you expand that to handle on time? Let's say, because the assumption that I made was I'm only handling the off time. Did you expand that assumption? Like, can that handle? Yeah, that's.
I think I haven't tested it, but it should. It just basically added in like, okay, if I try to do integrals, if I try to calculate the step response before the step happens, it's 0. Right? That's about what it needed there.
Yeah, and I also made an assumption that doesn't matter what time you put, it always, like the definition of time gates, it's after time, like when the current is 0. Did you kind of like expand that assumption such that it can kind of aligned with the current definition of SimPEG time domain code? Because like I think the SimPEG time domain, it just follows the waveform, the time defined in the waveform, and then it is relative to those waveform time. Is that kind of what? Okay, great.
Yep. It's just relative to whatever the waveform times are. So
yeah, I'm happy to review, and it's actually quite timely. So one of my colleagues who just finished his PhD is working with Californian Department of Water Resources, and they are doing this large-scale AM project in these days. And he seems keen to use that code, and he was actually asking me, do I need to use the old branch of 1D code or the latest one? So yeah, if we can kind of push this and then merge as soon as possible, it would be nice to just put them to main SimPEG branch.
I can walk you through it, Soggy, so you can see what happened. Maybe I have an idea of where I would change it to be able to support the stitched 1D simulation.
So yeah, that sounds awesome.
More naturally.
Yeah.
So
let's Joe, let's set up a call later. And
okay.
Have,
sounds good. But yeah, I've got it to a point where I'm happy with it. Like it's really simplified a lot, and it's more in the SimPEG. It looks like it's more in the SimPEG ecosystem.
Is it already time and frequency, or it's focused on time?
Time and frequency.
Cool.
It's both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it already handles all this stuff where it's like, okay, it's just Soggy, I went through and handled that, let's try to group them up by sounding. I handled that in a little bit simpler way. Whereas like I go through it, you compute all of like the wave numbers that you would need, and then just go through and like, okay, I'm only actually going to compute it on the unique wave numbers and not all of them, like repeatedly for everything. So that little transform handles what you're trying to do in a little bit more elegant way.
That sounds great. That was what I was hoping you to do. My implementation was like kind of brute force.
Okay. Well, that's what I've got.
Speaking of that, Joe, I had a chat with Dieter. Maybe this is not urgent, but something that we could potentially consider actually expanding that 1D code, not only the specific to a ground loop or airborne EM, we can actually switch that 1D kernel with EMPI mode. So for other types of survey, we can basically use EMPI mode to expand that. So we could have a little bit more general EM1D that could handle various types of EM1D inversion. But just a thought,
Yeah.
but it's probably
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Okay.
Just to check, Joe, confirm, are we gonna still be able to run general waveforms where it's like a piecewise linear?
Yeah, like I said, the general waveform was like a piecewise linear waveform. So I literally just made a piecewise linear waveform. Like that's the name of the class. Like it is
That's great.
implicit in what it is. Like it's piecewise linear.
Joe, one more check. Like, have you seen how I handle the dual moment? And kind of, did you keep that, or did you kind of extend it?
I didn't worry about handling the dual moment information, but the way it works right now is that it still just computes a single step response and then convolves it with everything.
Right.
So if you just had multiple, if you just split it up into two receivers, like two sets of sources and receivers, it shouldn't make it take any longer to simulate.
Right.
It would automatically reuse that waveform. It would automatically reuse the step response it calculated.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's good to hear because it was nice suck that you coded up, but it was so hard on the user side, right? And, depending on the system, then you need to build a different type of survey. If we can just do it in sequence, just like, okay, we have high moment, low moment, it's basically two different simulations. It's just easier on the user side. Yeah, that's great. Glad to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I have. Move on to Dieter.
Yes, yes, our paper got this morning finally accepted. The one I was working with Lindsay and Raphael from Custom and Octavio from PetGem. So that comes to an end soon. We're happy about that. And other than that, I'm working at the moment a bit more intensely with Sogi to get this EMG3D as a forward modeling kernel for SimPEG going. So we hope to have there something concrete generalized in the near future. Maybe even Sogi has some CSAMT data, so maybe even direction MT. We will see how that goes. That is it, I think. Did I put anything else in the list? I hope not.
No, I think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of that, we actually got the data from Derek and also from Doug. we're just collecting the data and not working, but we're going to work. Yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to invert both data and see what kind of results we can get out of it from EMD3D and SimPEG.
Cool. Devin?
Yeah, just more doc strings for me. Doc strings and examples. There isn't really anything else.
Cool. Is it going well though? No pickups or anything?
Yeah, I haven't gotten into a lot of the stuff on operators and things. Wait, just hold on one more. Mosquito. Yeah, I haven't gotten through trying to document a lot of the differential operators and stuff. Right now, it's more about finalizing the properties and then the methods for all of the mesh classes. So I think I'm making pretty good progress on that. I want to be done it by the end of the week. And then once I've gone through that, I'll start thinking of documenting the operators, because we should come up with a plan of how much math we want to put in those doc strings. I would like to have an actual definition of how we approximate the quantities. We don't have to go through like details of mesh construction, but it would be nice to know, like, this is what our definition of a kind of a numerical derivative is, and what order accurate it is. I think we could put something in there that is sufficient.
Yeah, I think the level of math I was like so when I was writing up the doc strings for like the boundary condition stuff, I didn't really give it too much thought, but what I put in there was just kind of like, this is the operation this represents, like not too much about how like the order it was, just like, okay, it's this, it's the numerical form of this part of it, like of this integral or something.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page for what level we want it to be at. I mean, the thing is, we want them to know what it is and be able to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But we already took the time of constructing it, so we don't really need to know nitty-gritty details. Like I'm fine with that.
If they're really concerned about nitty-gritty details, they can click the little source code link and find out for themselves.
Sounds very time-consuming. But yeah, it's going. But yeah, I want to be through the properties and methods for all of those classes pretty quickly. And yeah, I need to make a PR just so we can keep track and maybe have better feedback on that. So I'll probably do that when I'm done this stage of documenting. But that's basically it.
Cool. John, how's the MT stuff going?
It's finally moving again. Yeah, I found that I had 2 tests that were failing, and I figured out the one, and it was too much RAM. I guess what we've changed in the MT side on the receivers and storing matrices there, yeah, it's blowing it up. So yeah, I think it was like 30 or so frequencies were being made in this one test. Yeah, and it was blowing up to like 20 gigs or something like that, and I guess the virtual machine couldn't do it. So finally figured that out. I just pulled back to about 3 frequencies, and yeah, everything runs on that test. Now I just got, yeah, the seismic one that's still popping up. So yeah, looking at that. And then after that, I can finally move on to the tiling and getting that one brought in and all the tests passing. So one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. And it does, like, I don't know, like that brings up a point of like the amount of things that we are storing on things. I know it's a very vague statement, right? Storing things on things. The amount of like cached stuff we have is actually getting quite large for any of these problems. And like what Dom, how you referred to, like, oh, we need to like discard the mesh after we're done with it, like for your like for the tiling inversions and like other things. But it happens on receivers, it happens on a lot of things. We end up like caching a lot of quantities that really blow up the amount of memory usage it can.
Yeah, I'm going to start taking a look at that because we finally got all our backlogged resources, so we've got quite a bit to throw the tiling onto. And yeah, with the MT, we're getting like we can put it in production. Like we're getting 20 iterations in 12 hours, and really nice models. It's working really well now. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I could give a talk in a little bit with some of the parallelization that we've been doing. It's been pretty impressive.
It is probably also something where Sogi and I can give some feedback soon, because if it's working, the integration you have, then we might run inversions with 10 million cells. That is possible from the solver, but then it might accumulate things on the SimPEG side in the inversion, and then we will probably quickly find out and have to track down where it's getting stuck. So
yeah, we're with like a 500,000 cells, 9 frequencies, about a dozen stations. Yeah, we're pushing like 400 gigs.
But how much of that is from Paradiso and how much is from SimPEG?
Actually, about 60% of it is Paradiso, at least.
Yeah, so this will mostly drop off, but that means that there will still be 40%, you say. That's still a lot.
That's
so,
still a lot. But yeah, these direct solvers, they just eat up the memory. Chomod, I can't even get it to run on big problems either. It just spits out an error just saying it's too big. And I thought maybe there's like, you can look at the errors and how they're throwing, but that's on the C side and I can't quite find that code to see what's triggering that, unfortunately. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of stuff in the parallelization. Yeah, I would like to give a talk in the near future then too with this through SimPEG here and show you guys what we've been up to. Yeah, getting some pretty good speeds. It's awesome. But we're using MPI, unfortunately. So it's not Windows friendly per se. Yeah, Linux is great.
Mhm.
That's
Are you
about it.
using MPI for Pi, John? Is that what you're using? Are you using MPI for Pi?
Yeah, we're essentially just using that.
It's a slick interface for MPI. When I've worked with it,
Yeah, well, it's pretty much the same as MPI on C. Like it's translated so well that yeah, if you've used it on C, you can use it in Python pretty easy.
Mhm.
That's about it.
Any other updates from anyone?
I had one quick agenda item to add, if that's all right. One thing, and I think Joe, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but with new releases, to potentially do like a mail out or something like that to reach kind of a broader community and to let folks know what's changed, especially people who wouldn't be necessarily in Slack, but are perhaps using SimPEG, and not like of the release notes. It could have a link to the release notes, but more sort of with like the quick high level points of what's changed and like what the user would sort of see as impacts. So speed ups, new functionality, these sorts of things that are just kind of like the quick, hey, this is what we've achieved and what we've been up to, and also to give credit to the folks who have been, making contributions to those releases. We have a MailChimp account that we haven't used in quite a while. That's one option. I don't know if folks will, A, what folks think of this idea, and B, yeah, if you have any suggestions on how you might like to see that done so that it does reach a wider group. It would be great if we could get some folks who are using SimPEG regularly in industry to subscribe to a list like this so that they could just be aware of what's changing.
How does the MailChimp work? And yeah, how do we keep track of who's actually using any of the SimPEG routines?
So we can't really keep track of who's using SimPEG unless they're asking us questions. But what MailChimp does is it's an opt-in process. And so what we could do is sort of like send a first email to a bunch of people, like a personal email to a bunch of people that we think might be interested in subscribing, and then they can subscribe. And then basically what it is we create like a little web form. So they're kind of like nicely formatted emails basically. So you could create it in the MailChimp like template place. And then when you hit send, you can pick which list it goes out to, which list of your subscribers kind of based on their interests that they've indicated. But the simplest is we just email it to everybody who's opted into this list.
What about the EM potential channel on Swang? I think Leo is usually putting his releases and I started to put mine. Could also, probably there's a huge overlap with the SimPEG Slack and Swang Slack, but it might still be reaching some other folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea. We can make maybe a little bit of a list of where we want it to go. I mean, I don't want to turn this into something that like is kind of a huge lift after a release, but if there's, Twitter, 2 Slack channels that we hit and sort of a mail out, that seems feasible and not too much work.
I think that's a good step. I don't know, just trying to keep people up to date who aren't here.
Okay, well, maybe what I can do is I'll draft up like just a little, try and write this down and actually put it in that community repo of a bit of just a like SimPEG releases guide, and we can kind of iterate on where we would like to send things out to, and then maybe brainstorm just an email list of people we can maybe send a first personal email to see if they'd be interested in subscribing.
So the SimPEG release is going to be more like a technical aspect of SimPEG, like what kind of improvements we have made. And so that's like let's say if SimPEG was applied to a cool science problem, that's not necessarily going to be a release, I guess. So that's the idea.
I mean, we could like, it would be nice to perhaps include some of those. And we certainly could sort of include a small section in there on sort of like new science or papers or things like that that have been published that use SimPEG, or presentations that are upcoming. We could definitely use it for something a bit like that.
So could people opt in the different levels of it? Like, oh, I just want to get notified of, you know, new releases, or I'd like to see everything.
We can. In some ways, I would be tempted to just keep it pretty simple and just make sure that we're not sending these out too often that people feel spammed. But if it's like once a month,
maybe you could say, at least for the email, maybe only do minor releases and major releases, but not bug fixes, something like this. I don't know if you wanna.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah. Like the bug releases in the dev channel of SimPEG, because usually it's just those involved. I don't know, I find it difficult. I had the example with curve node, and then you were in the chat of SimPEG and in the Slack of Swang, and in the curve node Slack, and you tend up to get the same info several times. And yeah, that's probably the same with release note. If you put them on Twitter and on the SimPEG Slack and an email, and you're potentially on all of them, yeah, there's no easy solution.
yeah. Okay, well, we can try like sketching this out a little bit, and then maybe at the next meeting kind of take a look and see if it seems like a reasonable approach, and perhaps identify somebody who might take kind of a lead role in just making sure that this info gets out at the right points in time.
Anything else anyone would like to chat through?
Joe, what is the status of 2DMT code? Is that sort of available in main branch or still somewhere in the local branch?
It's still there. I just need I have time to get back to it now. It's the 1D stuff, which is kind of like really eating up a bunch of my time, unfortunately. But now that I'm in a happier state with it, I'm ready to go back to the 2DMT and finish that off.
That's good.
If I ever get this pull request or that test figured out, I'll come help you.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll stop the recording. Thank you everyone for coming by.
Thanks, everyone.